I think we're live now. As Liam
Yes,
gets
the little message says in the screen that we are live.
Right, so tonight we're going to talk about UFOs, or they were going to, well, today they're changing UFO to UAP, but we'll talk about that a bit later. So I thought we'd start with a little bit of history. So modern ufology starts around, you would think it starts around about the Roswell incident, but it starts just a few weeks before 1947. On June 24th, Kenneth Arnold, who was a pilot, was flying his little plane near Mount Rainier and saw 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects. And this coined the phrase the flying saucer. He didn't actually see it himself. If Liam wants to put up the first photo. So that's the headlines: supersonic flying saucer sighted by Idaho pilot. He estimated them because he was a pilot and he can estimate speeds. He estimated them about going about 1,200 miles per hour. And in his interview with the newspapers, there's just not this one. There's many of them. The kind he described seeing them like skipping across the sky, like a saucer would skip on if you tossed it over a pond. It skipped over it. So the newspapers then kind of turned it around and called them flying saucers. If you want to put up photo 2, Liam. This is his actual drawing of what he thought. They were more like a cigar shape end on and a half circle shape. So it's not exactly a saucer, but the newspapers coined that term, flying saucer. And if you put on photo 3, and that's he got an artist to do a representation of what he saw later on. So that was what Kenneth Arnold saw. And this just happened a few weeks before Roswell. This happened in June 1947. Roswell happened in July 1947. Debate about when it actually happened. It maybe happened just a little bit into June. So now we go to Roswell. So I'll call in the photo in a minute. So Roswell happened. So it happened over a kind of weekend. On Saturday the 5th of July, a rancher, Mac Brazel, made a trip from his remote ranch into Corona, New Mexico. He had no radio or phone at his ranch. He was unaware of the newspaper hype that had come about from Kenneth Arnold. It had gone national, but he was unaware because quite remote at that time. And he went into the town, and then he heard about the stories and saw the newspapers about that. And then he thought, there's something that had crashed on my ranch. And it was not until getting to town that he made the connection to the debris that he'd found 3 weeks earlier, so it would have been in June, with the flying discs in the news. So he went back to his ranch, and on the Sunday the 6th of July, he gathered up the debris and he returned. On Monday, took it to the sheriff in Roswell, which was the nearest town, to show him what he had found on his ranch. So the sheriff called the Roswell Army Air Force Base, and that was the home of the atomic bomb squadron at that time. So it was quite an important base at that time. So, and that's when Major Jesse Marcel came into the picture, if you've heard of him. And he was assigned to the case. And that's, if you want to put up the next photo, Liam, that's where we get the RAF captures flying saucer and ranch in Roswell region newspaper report. So Mac Brazel took Marcel back to the debris site, and the two of them gathered up as much pieces as they could. Marcel took the material home on the Monday night, and that's where he showed his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., pieces of the craft. And then the following day, on Tuesday the 8th, that's when this headline comes about. Marcel took the debris to the base commander, and then the base commander then passed that on to General Ramey, who will come important later on in the story. So that began the army going back in, or the Air Force going back in, to collect as much of this as they could. And I think there was just not the debris site, there was supposed to be the crash site as well. So, next photo, Liam. So this is Jesse Marcel. So he put out the first story, the headline Flying Disc, and then the very next day it's retracted. And Jesse is flown up to Fort Worth and is asked to pose with this material, which is obviously pretty much like balloon wreckage. Bits of balsa wood and scrap silver foil material type stuff. And they say that that's the start of the cover-up. They say that this is the material, and it was just a weather balloon, nothing to see here. There's another photo taken at the same time, if you want to skip to the next one, Liam. And this is General Ramey, and he's got the red box around this as a memo in his hand, and he's obviously showing the more of the balloon material and trying to sell this story. If you skip to the next one, then that's a closer in image. And back in back in those days, yeah, you're not going to be able to read that, but with computer technology and AI technology, we can now fill in some of the blanks and maybe put some of the words into context in General Ramey's memo. If you want to skip to the next one. So the important parts of this story in the memo is and the victims of the wreck. So that implies there were bodies found, and the word disc is in there. And today, Nick sent out press release of whether balloons would either take or fear or work, is the word they think is most likely. So that implies in this memo that back then he wouldn't have thought that the technology would have existed to see what was written on there. But yeah, this gives a good basis. Plus the fact that they still maintain that story, and they've changed it a couple of times to say that it's Project Mogul, they were dropping dummies in the desert. That counted for the bodies that were found, but if you go back and look, the crash test dummies were introduced in 1952 or 1953, which is about 5 years after Roswell. So again, why did they cover up Roswell? So we'll skip to the next slide. This plays a big part of it, in my view. Orson Welles in 1938 put on a radio play of War of the Worlds. Back then, radio was the main form of entertainment, many channels, lots of shows. War of the Worlds started at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And it started, usually the show started on the hour, but there was a particularly popular show on another channel, and a lot of people tuned in to that. It ran a few minutes late. And Orson Welles had stood up at the start of the play and said, "This is a radio play," and the disclaimer, yada yada. A lot of people tuned in a few minutes late and missed this, and they tuned into some music. It started as like a music show, and then they interrupted it with bulletins, saying something had crash landed in a farm in New Jersey. And then 5-10 minutes later, there was another news bulletin, and then several news bulletins throughout the hour, culminating in that they believed that it was invaders from Mars. And back then, they did believe that there was life in Mars. They believed there was canals, that Mars was a dying planet. The telescopes weren't so good back then, so they believed the eye matrixing. It was kind of connecting features on Mars with lines, and they thought there was canals, and that was the Martians digging canals in a bid to save their dying world. So it did create, you can see, fake radio war stirs terror through the US. There was There was people calling the police. They had the National Guard calling up saying, should we muster our muster stations? There was just a lot of a fear created that, and that I think was a lot to do with the government deciding that the public could not handle kind of this kind of earth-shattering news, that we are not alone, and decided to start covering things up from that point. So now fast forward to today. If you want to play that clip where we're speaking about Liam, we'll play a wee video clip, and it kind of brings us up to today's, where we're at today.
Story on UFO sightings by U.S. Navy pilots is causing a big reaction today.
We have tackled many strange stories on 60 Minutes, but perhaps none like this.
Notice the graphic UAP. That stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, better known as UFOs.
This 60 Minutes report yesterday was unbelievable.
The report focused on this extraordinary UFO sighting off Florida in 2015.
My gosh. Look at that thing, dude.
The UFO phenomenon has been around for more than 70 years and has become something of a joke. But Luis Elizondo, a former member of a secret Pentagon task force on unidentified aerial phenomena, tells 60 Minutes the government has been covering up the truth until now.
What you're telling me is that UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are real.
I'm not telling you that. The United States government is telling you that.
In 2004, U.S. Navy pilots were sent to pursue a UFO spotted on radar about 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. It was about the size of a fighter plane, but traveling many times faster than the speed of sound. Two of those pilots spoke out for the first time about what they saw.
And we saw this little white tic-tac looking object and just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there.
It was traveling so fast, it just disappeared off the radar screen.
If I saw this solo, I don't know that I would have come back and said anything because it sounds so crazy when I say it.
What are these things? Acclaimed physicist Michio Kaku says the 60 Minutes report is just the latest sign that UFOs are finally being taken seriously.
Have things dramatically changed because of this footage?
This is a game changer. We have to keep our minds open to the possibility that this could be extraterrestrial. We cannot rule it out.
So there really may be something out there after all.
So that kind of brings us up today, where part of the government cover-up was to make fun of anything or anyone that kind of saw or tried to report. It's not a real alien. Leave it. So we're starting to see a change, and you'll hear folks speaking about disclosure, and the slow walk. Mute, get down. We're starting to speak about disclosure, and this is part of the process. So UAP is now the term that's being used, because UFO is, well, you've seen a UFO, oh, you must be crazy. We don't believe you. So they've just decided to change UFO to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And you're starting to see the slow creep of scientists and government officials acknowledging that these are craft that are not ours, that are probably not Russian or Chinese. They would be stolen the fact that they had really far advanced craft if they were. So what other option are we left with? If they're not ours, they must be from off-world. There's also is it an interdimensional thing? Is it a time travel thing? So yeah. So if we're gonna, that's where we're at today. There's been congressional hearings. There's going to be more congressional hearings in America. We've got folk that used to work for the government. We've got Louis Elizondo, you saw in the clip, and the fighter pilot David Fravor, and his wing person that saw the craft, the Tic Tac, and that is just the start of it. So, and between 1947 and then there's been a lot of other ones. So, Alex, have you any favourite ones you want to talk about? UFO sightings.
I suppose it's always worth mentioning our domestic sightings. I before moving up to Inverness, coming to the right side of the wall, I lived in Cambridge, not far away from Mildenhall, near Thetford, up in Norfolk, Suffolk Way, which of course is the site of famous, a close encounter, wasn't it? Was it of the third kind? Would it be? Where we have a very, very large American Air Force base up there, and in the early 80s, it was 85, I think, 85. There was supposedly a craft landed in the woods, and actually the Americans were communicating with the pilots of said craft. You can actually get hold of some radio discussions from the sort of the guard forces that were sent out to the woods to investigate what these bright, shiny lights were.
Was that
Rendlesham? That's right. Yeah, Rendlesham Forest.
1980.
1980, and and you listen to them, they were going, well, we don't know what this is. What is this? Why is it doing it? But actually, as the story unfolds, you actually hear then that there was contact made. I believe the base commander was there and actually had a encounter with said occupant of the craft. And that's probably the most famous UK story, I'd say. And I don't think they've ever actually debunked that, have they? I think you'll get different testimonies, but
they tried to say that was a lighthouse, the lighthouse that was on the coast, but it didn't track with what the people, the soldiers, the RAF men or the USAF men were saying, that it was changing colours and moving higher and lower. They were just trying to say, because they were moving through the trees and the light was blinking through the trees, that it was the lighthouse. But it was the kind of lamest excuse explanation for it.
Yeah.
So, don't buy that one.
Absolutely. I also remember I went to when was this? This was in the mid-90s. They released the alien autopsy footage, and I actually went along and I dragged along a bunch of work colleagues to Sheffield, which was hosting the sort of the UFO conference that year, where they screened that footage. I remember Roy Hattersley was sat in front of me, bizarrely. Anyway, have you seen that autopsy video? Yeah.
It kind of was spectacular at the time. Then they debunked it, and there's certain groups that have swung the other way again, going back to thinking, maybe it's not faked.
Yeah. It's, for me, it was. I guess for me, it's actually almost the kind of the setting of where they were doing this autopsy felt a little too bare. There wasn't much going on around it. It just seemed to be a bit of a blank room. And I just kind of didn't seem authentic to me that they were doing it in such a austere environment, considering. And the clothes they were wearing, it just didn't quite feel authentic. It felt like someone trying to make it look authentic, but not actually achieving it. For my money. Here we go. Liam Selt's question: what about Bonnie Bridge?
Yeah.
So, what Can you tell us a bit more about that one then? Because I don't know so much about Bonny Bridge.
Bonny Bridge, was that the triangle one that was spotted?
Yeah, I think it was a triangle. Yeah.
Back in the 80s as well. I've not researched it much. Who was asking about that?
Liam was asking about that one.
Okay.
I was looking at some stuff in the Daily Record, and it was saying that there's been some bumper sightings of UFOs in the last couple of years, and it's gone up from like 2020 from like up from like 9 to 47 sightings or something in Lanarkshire, which apparently is a UFO hotspot. Who knew?
Yeah. Well, the Falkirk Herald's got. Go away.
Falkirk Triangle.
Yeah. They said about 300 sightings.
Hmm.
There was a lot. There's a debate about the triangles of whether this is new technology that we're developing, or is it extraterrestrial technology? So the black triangles, often seen with helicopters escorting or nearby. There was, when I spoke about the UFO magazine in the 90s last night, there was an article in one of those magazines, one of the editions back in the 90s. There was that helicopter. I'm gonna let this cat out, she's gonna be jumping on the handle. Out you go. The double helicopter crash in the 90s in the Mulligan Tyre. There was someone who, he wasn't named in the article, but he was in the forces. It said there was a memo basically saying to the Americans to take their new toy and bugger off, implying that there might have been something flying about that may have been at the back of the crash. So and that sort of linked into the Macrahannis runway, which is a really long runway down there. And it's always kept, I don't think there's anyone based there, but it's always kept immaculate. And there was kind of links to, and it's a remote site as well. There was kind of links to that was where the Americans were basing their new toy. Kind of word that was that the triangle thing that they were flying about. So yeah, there was a lot, and there was in the 80s, 90s, the Belgians scrambled their Air Force to chase triangles as well. So there's a lot of, there's not been so much recently, but there has been a lot. There was a good, well, we thought there was a good picture of a triangle down in the Bonny Ridge area that was taken, but the guys fessed up that they did hoax it in the end. So I wish people wouldn't do that. So, but yeah.
I mean, it's when you look at the sort of technology that the American Air Force has now, in terms of their stealth bombers and so on, and you look at their shape, it's uncannily similar to a lot of those sightings. Now, we don't know how long they had their prototypes for before they actually kind of started rolling them out, to do the business. So I think it'd be fair to say that there's a good chance that what people
they've probably been misidentified, but some of the closer ones where people would see them just hovering and silent Disney match the B-2s, the stealth bombers. So, but have we had some technology? Have we based a low radar craft, low radar response craft on something that we've gained knowledge of. We don't know, but hopefully we'll soon know. Yeah. And then there's, tying into that, there's the Bob Lazar factor. He was someone who worked at Area 51, and it's obviously Area 51's and now a common term. Back when I was reading the UFO mag in the 90s, it wasn't. Hello. Back in the 90s, it wasn't. Even when they did Independence Day the first time, because they mentioned Area 51 and included it in the film, they got no help from the military. So they had to do a lot of kind of basic CGI back then to do that, because they were insisted that they wanted to use the Area 51. And it didn't appear in maps for a long time. It's not that long since the USA government has actually acknowledged that it officially exists, kinds of thing. And it's still shrouded in a lot of secrecy. And that's one on the bucket list for me, to go up the nearest mountain, which is miles and miles away, and have a look at it and see it and get a photo by the fence. Then you'll get shot if you cross it. But yeah. So yeah, the Bob Lazar came out and said that he worked on back engineering craft. And there's plenty of interviews. Jeremy Corbell recently did a documentary with Bob Lazar, which is very good. It's on YouTube, I think. Or I'll go to Jeremy Corbell's YouTube channel and you'll find it there. And make up your own mind if you believe him or not. I mean, he came out and he said he worked there, and they obviously did the denial thing. But back then there was a printed directory, so they couldn't take his name off it, and actually hid the directory. And he was listed as an employee. So
yeah,
it's like.
So from your perspective, also, we're talking about this. A lot of people are getting excited that this is the year of disclosure, or we're entering this period of disclosure, and that there is this sort of sense that we are being prepared. The public's being prepared. Why do you think now? Why do you think that's?
Well, my pet theories are we are about to go back to the moon, Artemis. So Artemis on the launch pad this summer, this Easter. We're about to go back to the moon. We're about to build a base on the moon. So we're going to just going back. We're going to be long term there. And Elon is dead set on Mars. And in the way he is marching forward with his technology, that he said just recently tweeted, "We will land on Mars in your lifetime," and I believe him. I think we are starting to venture out. And as in Star Trek terms, we need to be prepared to meet what's out there. So I think there's a lot of things. China's going into space as well. Yep. They've started building a space station. We kind of control China's information. They've already put out a tweet. Their big telescope, like Arecibo, before it collapsed. They just put out last week, 10 days ago, they said they got a signal that they believe is extraterrestrial in origin. So if they can get first into the punch, I think they will. So I think there's a lot of things in that mix. We're going back to the moon, we're going to go into Mars, we're going to be a lot more in space. They can't control the information anymore. The internet is there and it cannot be controlled. So once something's on, it just spreads. Even if you take it down, somebody's copied it and sent it on. So I think they're speeding up the process and making it a bit more palatable for the people who are maybe a bit skeptical and earth orientated in their view. To widen their perspectives a bit.
And of course, that 2004 footage from the Nimitz battle group
The Tic Tac.
The Tic Tacs. I guess maybe there was a because we're in an information age where you can't hide stuff the way you used to be able to do it. And the fact is that you can tell everyone in that fleet, keep stum. It's one thing to say that now, and whilst we're all bound by the Official Secrets Act, you know, if someone's got their hand on that video, they can leak it out pretty easy. So maybe there was that sort of, well, you know what, we are at a point now where we can't contain the way we used to be able to contain. It's too many people.
Yeah, and you kind of ridicule that amount of people and the people who you've entrusted the safety of your country to. I mean, David Fravor, Top Gun pilot, and that was his wingman person there. And they also got the radio operator that he'd said the Tic Tac, they'd gone up to see it, to try and intercept it and find out what it was. It had been around there for a few days as well on the east coast, the San Diego area, Catalina Island. So they've all come out, and there was a second plane went up. His name, Commander Chad Underwood was the other plane that went up and saw it, and they've all made statements as well. Is that part of they're profiting from their disclosure? So is it part of the process? So we're believing the actual pilots and the actual people that have seen it. And I've always long said you could get someone to say, yes, I saw that person hit that person and stand up in court, and they would be believed. And if you got someone to stand up and say, I saw a UFO, they would get laughed at. It's the same principle. Why do you disbelieve people like that? So I'm happy that it's moving on and that's being less ridiculed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're probably a little. We're not. Yeah, I don't think this year will be the year of disclosure.
No.
I think it's going to be a longer process than that. But as you say, and actually, when you look at those congressional hearings, you've got people saying that Chief of Defense Staff, whatever, saying, look, we're calling it UAPs. We don't know what it is, but we actually don't think it's extraterrestrial because we've got no evidence of anything to say it's extraterrestrial, other than what we've seen on camera. They've got they're saying they haven't got anything physical. They've got no wreckage. They've got no organic or inorganic material. So they're still kind of...
To qualify that phrase that they haven't got any wreckage, this is... Louis Elizondo was from ATIP. ATIP has now been wrapped up, and we've got a new committee looking into the UAPs. They've only been formed for a matter of months.
Yeah.
They are saying they have no wreckage, not the entire USA Air Force or anything. They're just saying they don't have it. But they've only been operating for a few months. But they're trying to slip that under the net.
And this is the thing, isn't it? And knowing a little bit about how the military work myself, you do have this partisanship that, the Navy, US Navy may be saying one thing, but another branch of the US military won't be saying that for whatever reason they've got. So it's not always necessarily joined up. And of course, this is the congressional hearing. And of course, what they really want is to get it to the Senate. And when the senators start looking at it, then it becomes something very serious. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Was it Bill Clinton was on Chat Show recently, talking about how he wanted to find out, and I think Obama wanted to find out, and they never got the answers, did they?
No.
Or at least...
I'll go back to Independence Day. If you watch the film Plausible Deniability. Yeah. Which finds out, no, there was no aliens, there was no Area 51. And then the guy and goes, secretary goes, that's not quite true. Which part of it? I've watched that film too many times.
Quite enjoyed the sequel, but it's a bit dodgy. Question here from Lorna.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the drawings found in caves depicting what looks like spacecraft?
Yeah, I was going to say that this is not a new phenomenon. It goes back. The one thing, they're unusual because you get human figures drawn next to them, and they're obviously different. The one thing we have to watch is we're not putting today's brains and our today's perspective on a past thing. But that's certainly fascinating, and so I read Eric von Daniken's books, and some of his theories might be a bit out there, but he's convinced some of these drawings and things are that, and some of the Aztec carvings, and there's a glyph in one of the temples in Egypt, I can't remember which one. It's got looks like a flying saucer. And the guides don't point it out to you if you go around, so you've got to know where it is and where to look for it. But again, you've got to watch. You're not putting today's world interpretation onto a past thing as well. But it's pretty. If you Google it, you'll find it. The hieroglyphic UFO. And it's like, okay, looks like a B-2 bomber actually.
You watch shows like Ancient Aliens.
And
they're very quick just to say, "Oh yes, well,
it's
of course it's aliens." Yes. I sometimes feel that we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice in terms of our own ability to do stuff as a species. It's some very interesting stuff, and of course, you have those things in is it sort of Central America, which it's where they've done the shapes in the
South America.
You can only be seen from up high. Actually, what it is. Great work of ingenuity. However, maybe that's just a religious endeavor.
And there's the Aztec lines. If you Google them, you'll find them. And there's lots of straight lines. I don't think they were billed as alien runways in Eric von Daniken's book. I think. I don't think aliens need runways. But there's a lot of things. There's a good. It was on Amazon Prime. I watched a good documentary. I can't remember the name, but it looked at the buildings and how some of them we still kind of figure out how they were put together. There's a lot of there's Google H blocks in South America as well. Near the Aztec lines, they're so precisely, they measured them with lasers, and they're so smooth that it's difficult to produce today, never mind back then. And they're saying, it was polished by a rock. I don't think so. And they're so precise, and they fit together. The blocks slide together, and you can't actually even get a piece of paper between the joins and that. And there was no caves, but there's rock formations in India, and they've been hollowed out, and they're smooth to like glass inside as well. And it's there's a lot of technology that we've either forgotten or I'm not saying it's aliens, but there's a lot of stuff in the past, and there's the stories in the Bibles you could interpret. There's Ezekiel's wheels and Elijah ascending in a chariot to speak with God and get information or insights, and there's some stories as well that you can interpret. And if you Google UFOs in artwork, there's what the heck is that? There's a woodcut in the 1400s or 1500s from Germany, depicting an aerial battle that took place above a town. So there's a lot of UFO history in the past.
Yeah, and of course, it was in Russia, wasn't it, in the early 1900s? Is it Tunguska?
That was yeah. I watched the documentary. I think they pretty much decided that it's a meteorite. It exploded a few miles up, and it produced like a nuclear blast effect kind of thing. But yeah, that was touted for a long time. We didn't understand that.
Yeah. And of course, people just, again, put it down to some kind of extraterrestrial thing as a default. This is what it is. But of course, then actually, science comes in and says, well, actually, we know this thing can do it, so it's probably more likely to be that sort of thing.
Well, it's Occam's razor.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Explanation is usually the one that's the most plausible, or the one that finds out it's the one. Yeah. So yeah, I'll play it one. I gave Liam another clip with the Phoenix Lights. Not Phoenix Nights, Phoenix Lights.
Garlic bread.
Yeah, which is quite a good one. And that's 1997. That was the height of the magazine as well. So yeah, there's a lot of story in that little.
And she said, "Mom, you've got to run out and see." She came in the house and she said, "Mom, you've got to run out and see what's over Camelback Mountain."
March 13th, 1997. Sue Watson joined her 2 daughters and 2 sons in the front yard of their Phoenix home just south of Camelback Mountain.
We came right in the front yard and we saw this huge aircraft coming over, probably covered half the mountain.
What they saw was eerily similar to this animation of a boomerang-shaped aircraft described to investigators that night.
It wasn't 1 or 2 events. There were many events over many, many hours.
The Phoenix Lights became famous world over.
At the time in 1997, the vast majority of the media and throughout the community would snicker and laugh, "Oh yes, right, sure." But that's not happening anymore.
We've got sound. I can't hear Lyn. Can anyone hear me? We seem to be muted. I could be heard, but can't hear you, Lyn. Yes. So Lyn has gone silent. Perhaps if you sort of leave and rejoin, it might work. Oh, technology. They're trying to silence us. We're getting too close to the truth. Yeah, I think it's a good plan. Whilst Lyn's gone, I think I know this is a bit of a different topic for us that we're talking about UFOs. But of course, it's all part of the paranormal, the wider genre of paranormal. And of course, if you talk to some folk, there is the paranormality of the UFO phenomena isn't just spaceships, sightings, and stuff which kind of sits in the realm of science. And it's kind of understandable if you can buy into the idea that in the universe there will be other cultures, other societies, other races that can be technologically advanced and do stuff which we can't do right now, but actually their type of technology would make sense. It feels kind of, well, that's a different realm of stuff. But actually, when you talk to a lot of people, they absolutely feel that there's a lot of what goes on with the UFO phenomena that is more paranormal. And Lyn, you're back.
Yeah.
Yay! I was chatting about the sort of the kind of paranormality of the UFO world, and how there's a lot of it which is kind of, I think some people buy into UFO stuff because it's more science based, and there's almost a case of, well, scientifically this stuff actually isn't that implausible. If you take all we know and all we understand, the fact that an alien could do something that we can't, but it can be explained by science, absolutely, that makes sense. But you hear a lot of people talk about how there's more to that UFO phenomena. And when we talk about when people get taken. And what's the word? I've kind of forgotten the word when people get taken. What's it called? Abducted. That's the one. And the impact that has on people and what that means to them, and it's almost a spiritual experience then. And there's this and the relationship they have with that UFO phenomena and aliens is very different from, let's say, what we've been talking about, which is that purely that sort of we're going to the realms of what the government doing, science, craft, and that's a very different area. But it's really important to some people, and it's a huge field in and of itself. Is that something you've sort of looked into, Lyn?
Yeah, well, it's very, when you watch some of them give interviews, that it's very real for them. And you do wonder what is going on. There's the whole this Travers Walton thing that happened back in 75, I think. Mark it down. No, I didn't write it that. And he was a logger chopping down trees, and there was three or four others in the van, and they'd finished and they were heading off, and they all stated they saw a craft. Travers Walton got out of the car and walked towards the craft, and got knocked unconscious and thrown back, and his buddies all left and they disappeared for 5 days. And the police were convinced that there was some skullduggery going on. They maybe had done them in, and they're just making up the story. And then he was found just walking down the highway again 5 days later. And they've all taken polygraph tests and they passed. So if you went to Google it, there's plenty of online story interviews with Travers Walton. He's still doing the rounds, some of the conventions as well. I like to go and hear him actually speak in person at one point. So to him, it's very real. He's passed the polygraph test and disclosed some procedures, or they were going to do some procedures on him, not just little alien type people. He said there was actually a human that he was so upset with these little figures and little aliens running around. A human came in and took him to another room, and he doesn't remember much else after that. So are we working with them? Or have we been working with them? You watch the X-Files, you will say yes. I love the X-Files.
Lauren's asking, why do you think it's such a big secret by governments? Well,
yeah, well, there's that started back with the Orson Welles thing, the whole freaking out. You have to understand, America, the coasts are very liberal, are very open to ideas, but the Central Belt is still very much religious. To them, the Earth is 6,000 years old. We are only populated planet in the universe. And there's a lot of people still hold fast to that belief. It is changing slowly, and I think this is part of the process. So I think they do keep it a secret. The Central Belt will have the saying that's Bibles and guns or something like that, is in the saying that they hold on to their Bibles and guns. There would be a lot of mass panic and a lot of mass hysteria and a lot of problems if I think they came out with it just like that. And sort of following on to that is like, why do they just not appear in the White House lawn and say, take me to your leader kind of thing? Partly, if you watch Star Trek, you'll say, non-interference is a prime directive. And even in our own culture, if we go back to when the Spanish went to South America and introducing a more advanced, it was, well, from today's perspective, it wasn't advanced culture, it was advanced culture to the South Americans. When one culture imposes on another culture, it's always a disaster usually. We introduced diseases they had no immunity to, we went to their stuff to get rich, and just decimated and diseased, and they decimate the population. they killed and took what they wanted. So it's never ended well when a more advanced culture has gone in to a less advanced culture in the past. I think we're hopefully moving beyond that now. Sometimes I wonder, but
so how do you think that syncs then with when we've got, if you take that approach that you've got an alien culture that follows the prime directive effectively, how does that sync with all the sort of abductee stories, which aren't necessarily a positive experience for people? We won't mention probing that much. You know, and is there arguably, are we talking, is there more than one alien species? That's been posited, isn't there? There's some good guys and some bad guys out there. And so why are we still encountering them on the fringes so much? What's going on? Why are they doing that to the point where they are being noticed, they are being spotted, and we are cataloguing it? It seems to be a bit sort of, doesn't quite tally. I mean, as you say, are they working with? Is somebody working with the government? It would make more sense, I guess, in a way, that if there was communication, that's why they're keeping it secret. Whereas if there wasn't, and they literally just had some stuff, you just think, well, here's the stuff, and here's what we've developed from the stuff, and that's made us the biggest player on the planet because we've got the stuff. You know, why hasn't the US government, if they've got some really cool tech, why haven't they just gone and like beaten everyone else up with it? You know,
well, it's understanding it and making it work. I think there's a big thing. I mean, in ufology groups in the past, there's always the big in joke of where Velcro comes from. And then microwaves and that kind of technology, and it slowly gets filtered into through companies and into our lives slowly and surely. That's the easy stuff that we understand, but if you again watch Bob Lazar back engineering, they were still trying to figure a lot of stuff out, how these things work. I just read something today actually about Lockheed Martin doing patents on some exotic fusion reactions, and so energy, or how we produce energy, is going to be changing.
That's the holy grail, isn't it, with the fusion? Yeah.
So yeah.
And they're also saying that they don't seem that they mean us any harm. Well, arguably not, because they could probably, if they could, they could do more harm if they wanted to.
Again, I read a paper one time that said any civilization advances to that point that they can travel between the stars probably are not a violent people, because if they were a violent people, they would have killed each other on their own planet before now. And it kind of like mirrors, we set off that atomic bomb, and hopefully we'll never do that again. But we could easily be on the brink at any time. But if we make it beyond, I think we would become more non-violent as we develop and progress through the ages as well.
And there's this whole, again, body of thought which says that we are the planet was seeded. And we are essentially a growth project.
Well,
I'm not into that myself. That whole kind of someone else started our evolution.
There's a whole thing about panspermia, comets and bringing things, and the Japanese have they sent a probe out and took some samples from a comet, and that came back in 2020, and so they've just released a paper as well saying they found I can't remember the number, but there's more than one different amino acid, which is the building blocks of life, they've found on this comet. And which is really good. It's not from a meteorite that's come through the atmosphere, which then could have picked up some amino acids in our atmosphere or our planet. It's a sterile sample. It's come straight from a comet out there. It's not come in contact with the planet. So they've found there's building blocks of life. Because that was the big questions, how the more complex amino acids were produced. How did they come together? Was it just an accident? So now they've factually found amino acids on an asteroid out with our planet. So if it's there, and now the James Webb Telescope is starting to produce, and I find it very interesting. They slipped in not just a pretty picture, but they looked into a planet's atmosphere and they found water vapor in there. So where there's water, there's life. So the first 5 pictures they introduced, they slip in. And it's not a picture, but it's just data. Because they waited till the planet went in front of the sun, pointed the telescope at it, and measured the wavelengths through the atmosphere of the planet. So they find that there's water vapor in there. So that's another block into or another step on the way on this disclosure path.
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting. It was one of the first things that they did.
And of course, it is very much now that it's a standard news piece now, isn't it? Where we're finding more planets. Where 10 years ago, it was still, we weren't doing that. And then suddenly we're at a point now where we're going, we found another planet.
I've lost count. Started in the 90s. We found the first ones, and then it was up to 25 and something like that. And now we're hundreds. And it's not big news anymore.
No.
But the James Webb Telescope is being built that if there is alien life on planets, we will find out by finding it, that measuring our atmosphere, looking for gases that can only be produced by life. I'm not saying it's intelligent life, it could be basic life, but it would be life. And once we get that step along the way as well. But finding amino acids on that asteroid suggests that if amino acids out there, there are going to be amino acids elsewhere. And if you've got water, it's a done deal.
Absolutely, and then it's just science, isn't it? Really. I there's like a parting shot. Of course, I just want to throw it out there. I sort of smiled when I heard this one about how there's a bunch of people out there that tie in Bigfoot with aliens. You've heard of this? Yeah, how there's some kind of, the Bigfoot are in and of themselves sort of trans-dimensional beings.
Okay.
Yeah, that are often seen.
Yeah, and there's a whole part of the UAP speculation is not just not just it's maybe something from another planet. It maybe be a trans-dimensional thing. There's the whole multiverse is big in the Avengers just now, but it is a proper theory that our universe is out there. Then there's the Star Trek thing, and it's like the quickest point between two objects is a straight line. It's like I'll draw the straight line, and it's that's Earth and that's another planet. And it's like a long way, and when they got the energy, so we could either, once we get exotic material or exotic energy source. Scientists have said that warp is a theory that it's a plausible theory that it could be made true, but we don't have the energy sources. So warp is basically explained like this. So if we got an exotic energy source, that dot there. So instead of we still travel on a straight line, instead we just warp space and we bring the 2 points closer together. So we just have the short distance to that. We could warp space, or we could create a wormhole, interdimensional portal. So there's the whole thing about that. Or is it time travel? Is another thing I've heard.
Yes.
people from the future coming back. I mean, we'd all like to know how the pyramids were built.
Yeah,
Or
so
Stonehenge.
now we're getting into timey-wimey stuff, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. So is it that? There's lots of things. There's lots of things. But the thing is, it's now being turned from a subject that's to be made fun of, or it's to be called swamp gas or Venus or any other excuse but an unidentified flying object. And we're now changing it and changing up to unidentified aerial phenomena and making it more acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it is interesting times.
Yeah, there's a Chinese proverb that may you live in interesting times.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we
absolutely.
are. And I cannot wait for Starship to go up.
I know, soon.
Yeah, they did a wee little explosion the other day. Elon he was doing tests on spinning up the Raptors on the booster, and he tried to spin up 33 at once, and the LOX line blew, and it poof. It was spectacular, but it was liquid. It was basically just liquid oxygen. It just flashed up and burned off, and he says, lesson learned. We'll only try spinning up one at a time from now.
That's what it's all about. Lesson learned.
Yeah.
That's how you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was incredible. I went to see them in Easter, so it was totally awesome.
Yeah, I bet.
Just yeah, it's in a public road, so they kind of block you out. So there's public access to it. It's a beach road, so it's a public access road. So you can just drive along it, park at the side, and just stand there and gawk at them at the other side of the road for as long as you want. And it's just amazing. Obviously not when they're doing tests. The road gets closed, but they kind of close them on the weekend. That's the deal, because it's a beach, and it's the nearest. South Padre Island's kind of party island, so they went to the still to come, so they're not allowed to close it on the weekend. So, but you can just park there and stay at Starship for as long as you want.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the International Space Station is due to shut down. 10 years? 10 years or so. It's supposed to be going out of commission in about that sort of time period. I can see it extending.
Maybe. Well, it depends how quickly he gets Starship up and running, because once he gets it up, the cost per payload is going to be so low that they will quickly be able to build another one. They'll probably need a way station for the moon. They're going to put one on orbit around the moon and a base on the moon, but I think they'll still need something up there. But once Starship's, it's the payload that can carry is huge compared to anything else that's on the go.
No, I'm really looking forward to that. It'll be awesome. So we're 5 minutes past 9. I think.
That's it. I could talk about it all night.
I know. So I think we should cut the show.
Yeah, when Liam come back in, or
come back, Liam. The power behind the throne.
Evening, everyone.
The Wizard of Oz.
Thank you guys for a fascinating hour. Really enjoyed that, sitting in the background, and great that I could actually stay quiet and no one had to listen to me tonight, but absolutely fascinating. Really liked it, and I hope everyone else did as well. It's nice to have a bit of variety.
It's a branch of paranormal as well.
It is a branch. You took the words out of my mouth. It's all paranormal. So yeah, thanks to everybody for joining, and hope you, as I said, we'll do more. We'll do more, definitely. Okay. There's a few messages, so I'll pop them up on the screen quickly.
Yeah. Cheers, Mark. Thanks, Lorna.
So I think we can say good night to everyone. Stay safe, and we'll speak to you all soon.
See you again. All right.